seen, as most people have, on social media platforms and whatnot, advertisements for the little vials, of peptides, and had never really experimented with them at all because they lacked a little bit of credibility to me at first blush, and the thought of, injecting yourself with substances that aren't necessarily prescribed by doctors didn't make a lot of sense to me. But when I started to do the research, I was blown away at what I was finding and the impact of peptides at the consumer level. So peptides, like you said, we had beauty products with peptides, but we never told the story. We never explained what peptides are and what they do. It's like we just threw a peptide in for an ingredient and said, hey, cool, peptides. We never told the story. And as I did my homework, and, honestly, one of the things that was really convincing to me was your before and after picture, right? I'm going, whoa.
Sure, everyone my before and after picture they tell it to.
Yeah, I mean, before and after pictures sell. And it worked with me. And so I did homework, started to explore the category a little more significantly, tried some peptides myself, and just became convinced that the marketplace is ripe for an explosion of this peptide science. It's who's the author, Justin? We were talking about. I'm going to space here on the idea that something that hits the billionaires.
Tim Ferriss was the one thing.
Tim Ferriss, looking at market trends.
Yeah.
Something that hits the billionaires, you keep your eye on those things because they're the people who are spending a lot of money on
It's almost like the
leading edge
into the
science.
Yeah.
And when something transitions from the billionaires to the millionaires, it's going to go mass. And peptides are right there right now. They're still, they're entering the mass marketplace, but they're still largely for people who are going to clinics, getting the blood tests, really under doctor supervision. And there's so much development, so much work going on in this space that I just thought, okay, this is cool.
So I want to dive into that because we looked at doing basically a synthetic peptide company.
Yeah.
So in other words, buying a compounding pharmacy, just doing that whole thing. Let's talk through why we didn't do that. This is, both of you, and then how we discovered these bioactive, these nature peptides, because that's when it started being like, whoa, we got something really special.
Yeah, synthetics work. The success of the GLP-1 drugs is a reflection of that. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people are losing millions of pounds on the GLP-1 drugs, which are just synthetic peptide products. And so, there's something there. There's some validity to the science. Man, there's a lot of unknowns there too. Like, who's really compounding these things? Are they made? What lab? Where are they really being made? A lot of them probably coming into the U.S. from foreign markets, including China, right? How do you know what's going on in those labs? How do you know how pure these things are, and whether they're adulterated or whatever the situation may be? And then how do you know how to dose them? Nobody's telling you how to dose these things. And when you buy them, you have to promise that you're buying them not for human consumption, for research purposes only, for experimental use only. You sign your life away, when you buy synthetic peptides. Consumers are not doing the blood tests regularly to really track what's going on in their body. So they're complicated, they're expensive. You're injecting them for the most part, which I think consumers are. With the GLP-1s, they're probably getting a little more used to that, but I don't think anyone loves the idea of injecting themselves on a daily basis or multiple times a day. So, and based on my experience and just from a regulatory perspective, I look at that whole category and just go, okay, what's the likelihood that the FDA and the FTC allow these things to run in the marketplace without significant oversight and significant regulation? Not very high.
So I remember I was on a walk again, theme of the podcast, and I remember we were on the phone, and you had found through your research and scouring the internet, you'd found kind of this little interesting company that was like had almost $100 million of VC money.
Yep.
They built this incredible AI technology. They had this really pretty amazing story, an amazing biotech technology story with natural peptides. And they had like 14 views on their YouTube video. It was just kind of like going nowhere. And in a way, and I don't say that to put them down. I'm just saying they weren't telling. It was like this incredible breakthrough story that wasn't being told.
Yeah. I mean, the breakthrough story is finding these chains of peptides in nature, in rices and in yeasts and in oats and in things that you can grow and control, extracting them from plants, embedding them in a matrix that enables us to run them through the gut instead of having to stick yourself and inject them on a daily basis. I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, you know, when AI gets us to the point where we can identify these peptide chains in natural plant sources, who's going to complain about that, right? There is no regulatory issue when you're extracting these things from rice or from yeast. These are just natural ingredients found in nature. The problem is that when we eat them naturally through diet, our guts break them down fast because peptides are fragile. So they're destroyed in the gut before they can get into the bloodstream to deliver their message and say, do this, you know, burn fat, build muscle, you know, deep sleep, you know, whatever the intended message is. And so when we ran into these labs who had been working on AI platforms for years and spent literally tens of millions of dollars, it's just, we knew they had a really compelling story and they didn't have a way to tell it.
Yeah. Remember we went to California, the group of us. We went to dinner. And honestly, I felt, I don't know, I've never told you guys this, I felt kind of out of place a little bit. I didn't know for sure what my role was because I'd never done these kind of negotiations before. I remember Truman turned to me at dinner and he said, Justin, what do you think is going to happen with this company, you know, if we make this partnership? I just thought, man, this isn't I think in this to myself, this isn't a very articulate way to say it, but I'm just going to tell these guys the way I really feel. I go, we're going to freaking smash it, is if we do this, you know. And they're looking at me like, okay, they're like kind of scientists, you know, kind of people. And they finally said to us, they go, why, with all due respect to you guys, they knew Truman's background, you know, maybe mine, maybe me and Jay's, whatever. We not only have we not sold $1, I mean, all we had was like a slide deck or something.
Nor were we offering them $1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't going to pay them anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we said, we want to be basically, for our sales channel, your exclusive partner in this key peptide that you've spent $80 million developing and researching and finding and the whole thing. And they basically said, with all due respect, you guys have sold no products. We have the big dogs. They had literally had some of the biggest dogs in the world in our sales channel, like multi-billion-dollar businesses, saying to them, hey, we'll tell your story. We'll tell your story. They said, should we go with you guys? Are a startup that sold nothing, you know? And I thought your answer to him was so interesting. It was just one of those nostalgic moments looking back that really helped to kind of create what is now Make Wellness. Mm-hmm. So what did you tell him?
I mean, I said, look, I ran one of those multi-billion-dollar companies, and let me tell you, they're not going to tell your story. They already have 50 other stories that they have to tell. And your story is going to get buried among all of the other stories that these companies think they're supposed to be telling. We're the ones who are going to fly your flag. We're going to tell your story. It's going to be front and center to everything we do. And, you know, we had just enough credibility and just enough emotion to get them to bite.
Yeah, just enough logic, just enough emotion.
Well, let me tell you a story about that same dinner. So you guys have been at big dinners where it's like you end up having conversations around the table that are not the same conversation because there's just so many people, it's noisy, whatever. So these guys are having a conversation down on this end. I'm down on kind of on the other end of the table, and I've got a couple of the kind of scientist guys on my side. And I'll tell you, that was, I think that I had kind of this inkling of like, okay, there's something here, there's something amazing here, but I woke up to it during that conversation. Here's where that came from. So, you know, Truman talks about the AI technology, and I think AI it's this buzzword now we just throw around. It's like, so what does that even mean? Like, why did that matter? Why does that unlock this power? And the conversation I was having with this scientist on the end, he asked me this question of like how many how many peptides do you think like exist out there in nature or whatever? And I was thinking, well, it's like I've heard of the GLP-1 stuff, and like I know insulin's a peptide. So I was like, I don't know, like a couple hundred maybe. Like I had no idea even what to say. So I was like, I'm gonna go high and say a couple hundred because I know of two. And he said there's billions of peptides that exist in nature. He said there's actually between 7 and 8 billion peptides that exist from natural sources. The plants, like everything that you see out there, has peptides built in it. They're the messengers to the cells, not only in humans, but in other organisms as well. And I said, billions. And then he said, how many peptides do you think are in the human body? Right? And I was like, I don't.
Receptor.
Right. Like how many different peptides exist in the human body that do what they do, that messaging, like we talked about. And I was like, dude, I don't even know. Just tell me. So it was about 7,000. Okay. So what he said to me is he said the reason why this is so exciting is because what we've had prior to this is a math problem. So the reason why it's been unlocked is because the supercomputing and the AI technology has now allowed us to say, of these billions of peptides that exist out there, which ones look like they're going to match the 7,000 that work in the human body? And now we can point researchers and scientists in the right direction. So historically, it had just been needle in a haystack. Insulin, an accidental discovery. So that's what unlocks the power. So when you think about peptides as a platform, and I'm talking about the peptides that come from nature, like we use, the potential to have a platform that can cover hundreds, if not thousands, of functions within the body exist. That's what got me excited. That's when I said, like, dinner's over, let's sign this deal, let's go. Like.
Also at that dinner, you remember the conversation where I was kind of chiding them a little bit for the fact that they were producing these relatively high quality videos that were literally getting 14 views on YouTube. And one of their scientists said something like, yeah, but that's a $100 million problem. Thinking, oh, they need to raise another $100 million so that they can advertise their story, right? And my recollection is I said, no, that's a multi-billion-dollar problem, and that's what we're going to pay people to tell your story.
This is part of what I hope people get, because like you had kind of my passion, you had all three of our like passion to serve people and like future of wellness stuff, and then you also had this like we wanted to create economic opportunity. I think all three of us have a similar heart of like it just like does good for my soul to like watch these individuals and these families change their economic situation, even if it's just those small little meaningful dollars. And the way that the model basically works is instead of paying that to Joe Rogan on a big podcast, or paying it to Meta on Facebook and Instagram ads, or paying it to TikTok, for example, what you do is you basically say, listen, we'll pay about half. If we sell $1, about 50% will be paid in a marketing expense, but it'll be distributed to these people, these individuals and families. And so I remember thinking, and you said this to me, you said, Justin, I don't even want to do this unless this is when we're going through the product thing. You said, unless we can build a multi-billion-dollar platform, I don't want to do this, And if we go do $1 billion in revenue, $500 million is paid out approximately in commissions, in the marketing expense to these families, And that's when I remember thinking, we have a multi-billion-dollar platform, this peptide platform, this bioactive peptides. And what's so interesting, kind of fast forwarding 11 months later, we become the #1 bioactive peptide company on the planet, And it's what I feel like we need to do is we need to have another session and actually tell the story from there, because that's
the startup story.
The startup.
This is the pre-startup story.
This is the prelude to the main movie. But what I think is fair to say to wrap, as we kind of have this discussion, a friend of mine called me about 10 days or 2 weeks into this, and she's kind of a life coach, spiritual coach. And she normally is the kind of person where our relationship is she would text me, hey, can you talk this week? We're not super good friends. She picks up the phone. I see her name. Pick it up, and I go, hello, what's up? What's going on? She goes, hey, you've been on my heart. She goes, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing great. And what I should have said is like, I'm not doing so great. I feel terrible. I just burst into tears. She goes, I got a word for you. And I go, what's that? She goes, trust the redirect. She goes, trust that God's in the details of your life, and trust that you're being redirected for good right now. This is 10 days in to the termination. And on one hand, like the hair stands up on your arms, feel it in your soul, and on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, I don't really want. Can we just put Humpty Dumpty back together again? I don't want to redirect this anymore. Like, I want back to my old life, you know. And I look back now, you know, sometimes the worst day of your life and the best day of your life are the same day. And, you know, you have the right people that come together with the right heart, people that have been revealed to you in tough times. You have the right idea and the right mission and purpose, you know, in our case, to go make a difference in the world and to build a team of people that wanted to make a difference and to go do something that makes a difference. But on our next one, what I want to talk about, and we'll do this one soon so that we don't leave you guys hanging on a cliffhanger here, is just how we put this team together. You know, how Bob Finnegan wakes up at 3 a.m. and says, it's called Make Wellness, you know, and just all of a sudden this team starts to come together. And that